Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of our Tableau Tip Battle. Today, we're going through speed vizzing tips. Now, what are these? These are tips to help you speed up either making a visualization or to speed up the performance of your visualization. My name's Sophie Sparks. I'm the community manager here at the Information Lab, and I'm going to be the MC for the next hour worth of tips. But more importantly, who are the two fantastic people who are going to be taking you through these tips? So you may or may not know them. They're two of my fantastic colleagues, both data scholars at the moment, Stefana and Louise. You may have seen their vizzes. They've both been made Viz of the Day in the not too distant past. So recently they've both had Viz of the Days. And if you are London-based, and particularly if you are London-based and work in Canary Wharf, you may have recognized Stefana's name. She is the Canary Wharf Tableau and Alteryx user group leader. Now, both Stefana and Louise are sort of up and coming in the data viz world, so great people to watch. They make amazing visualizations. So if you don't follow them on Twitter, please do. You should be able to see their Twitter handles there. And at the end of the session, well, probably an hour or so after the session, they will both publish their tip workbooks. I will upload the links to those workbooks on the YouTube video. So please also do check out their Tableau public profiles and follow them on Tableau public. So here is Stefana and Louise last year at Tableau's conference in Vegas. If you joined us on Monday, you may remember a very similar picture with this pink shaggy background for our two tippers who went through on Monday, Steph and Mike. We all crowded into this the photo booth, and this was a much less serious looking picture. So both Stefana and Louise having fun making their vizzes. So without further ado, I will actually, I'll explain what we're going to do today. So both Stefana and Louise are going to go through and grab the screen off each other as they show you some of their speed vizzing tips and tricks. And at the end of the session today, we will try another vote. After some feedback from the voting we did yesterday where people didn't quite have enough time to answer the questions, we'll only have one question this time, and that is how many tips in total did these two go through? So count the tips as you see them, and at the end of the, after they've finished at the end of the session, you'll have a chance to let me know how many tips you thought they went through over the next hour. So without further ado, I think, Louise, you're starting. If you can grab the screen off me and we'll be getting going.
Yeah, okay, just give me 1 second. All right, can you see my screen?
We sure can.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, Sophie, for the introduction. So to start, Stefana and I will go through some speed building tips, and then we'll move on to different categories later on. So our first tip is how to add data from Excel more quickly than you would normally do. So normally you would click on this button to add connect to data, and then you choose Excel, and then you'd go through your file explorer to find the Excel that you're looking for. But here is another way you can do it that is quicker. So if I show you this Excel, it's for chocolate prices with completely random scores, I assure you. So if I click Control A to select everything, and then Control C to copy, and then I go back into my Tableau workbook, I can click Control V, and then once it finishes executing the query, you can see it's added all the data from Excel into Tableau really quickly. So you can see at the top here, this is creating a whole new data source for the table I've just added. I can rename it to be chocolate. And then I can use all the fields that were in that table to build the charts I want to do. So that's a really quick way of bringing your data in from Excel. And did you know you can actually do the opposite as well? So you can actually export the data from a viz in Tableau into Excel. So to do that, you can see I've got a chart with state and profit. So what I can do is click Control A, and what I'll do is select all the marks that I have in the view, and then Control C to copy that. And then if I go into Excel and just open up a new sheet and then do Control V, all the data that was in that chart that was in Tableau is now here. So I've got state and profit. That's a really quick way of getting your data in and out between Tableau and Excel. So my next tip is on how to quickly determine what aggregation that you want in your charts. So for example, in this case, I might want average of profit. Normally, I could just drag profit into category and it would automatically do sum. Then I'd right click and then change the aggregation to average. But a quick way to do this would be to go to profit again, but this time instead of left click dragging, I will right click drag. So I'm clicking my right click on my mouse, dragging it over to columns, dropping it, and then you can see this box pops up where you can choose what aggregation you want. In this case, I want average. And then you've saved yourself a couple clicks. You can actually also do the same thing with dates as well. So if I want to see exact continuous dates for profit over time, so with order dates, I could drag it onto columns and it automatically do year and then choose exact date. Or I could do what I did earlier and right click drag instead of left click dragging order date onto columns. And then again, you'll see this dialog box pop up and I can choose the aggregation I want, which is continuous order date. And there you go. So with these two tips, you save yourself a couple clicks. Another tip I have for you is sometimes when you have a long list of dimensions, it takes you a while to actually find the field that you're interested in. So if I want to see profit for every state, I could look for where it is, oh, here it is state, and then drag it over to columns. Or what I could do is go to columns where I want state to go and type in directly state. And I can quickly have it go where I want it to go. And I can do the same thing on the marks card or on the rows. So that's just a quick way of adding a field to your view without having to search for it and then drag it into view. So those are my first couple of tips for how to speed build your vizzes. I'm going to hand over to Safana now, who will show you some more tips on speed building.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. As Louise said, I'm Safana and I'm from the data school, and I'll be taking you through the other portion of our speed building on Tableau. So what I have here is I'm connecting to sample superstore data, and I would like to build sales over time by segment. So I've got the sales over time, but I don't have it split by segment. And the tip here is that I'm going to try and look for the field. So thankfully, sample superstore has nice, clean data, and there isn't too much, but typically in our working world, we will be connecting to data sources that have a lot of fields, and it can be quite hard to look for them. So one tip that I have is that you can actually quickly find them by looking at the magnifying glass right here on the dimensions pane. So you can click that and you can search for your field. In my case, it will be segment. Found segment, and I'll drag it on and I'll put it onto the row shell. And I can also put it onto color, so I can split them apart. Another thing is there's a shorthand on how to do this. If you press Control F, you can also go and find the field that you're looking for. So you can see that prompt here. So yeah, that's a really quick and easy way to look for a field. Next tip that I have is adding multiple pills to color. So Tableau lingo, sometimes you could call these fields or pills. So I'm going to call them pills. So I'm looking at a bar chart where I want sales by segment and ship mode. So I currently have it split by region, and I'd like to color it by its segment and ship mode. So using the previous tip that I've given you, I'm going to look for segment and I'm going to add it to color. And then I'm going to look for ship mode because I want to have it split by both ship mode and segment. So found ship mode, I'm going to drag it onto my marks pane, leave it there. So currently defaults to detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this and then I'm going to change it to color. So what happens here is that now that you have your viz split into multiple colors by both segment and ship mode. And you can see that legend here. So you can also actually decide the color or order that you want. So currently what we have is segment followed by ship mode. But if I want ship mode to be first, then I'll just have to put segment below ship mode. So now you can see that the actual order changes as well. If I wanted to go back, I'll just push ship mode beneath segment. And that's it. That's a nice and easy way to add multiple pills to color. I found that this is the easiest way, because typically if you just put ship mode on top of color, it'll just replace segment by default or whatever is currently on color. So it's easier if you actually just drag the field, put it into the marks pane, and then change it to color. Okay, moving on. Now I'm going to show you how you can add reference line from an axis. So what we have here is a question, which quarter was below target? So I've got a parameter here on the left. So what that is, I've just set a dedicated target of $120,000. That's the sales target. And I'd like to color those that are below in red. So I can change this accordingly. If I want to look at sales that are below 150, I'll just change it and then the bars will change. So the thing is, I can see which quarter is actually below the target, but I actually can't tell where 150 is. So I like to add a reference line. Typically what you would do is that you'd go onto the analytics pane and you can drag a reference line as so, but I'm going to show you a quicker way that you could do that. I know that I want the reference line to appear in my sales axis. I'm going to go on my sales axis, right click, add reference line, and then I'd immediately get a pop-up. So of adding a reference line, band or box. In this case, I want a line. And the value is actually my reference line value, which is a parameter. And I want to show the value. I don't want a tooltip. And this is the font and features that I like. That's it. That's a quick and easy way. If you don't want if you've accidentally made a reference line, you can also remove it and so on from the axes. I can also quickly show you the same thing with this one. So for example, if I want to show the total sales value for each region, so currently we have it labeled for each color, segment and ship mode, but I want to see the overall sales in each region, I could do the same thing by showing the header of that axis, then going to that axis, add reference line, and I want it per cell this time because I want it by the regions, and I want to show the value, and I don't want to have a tooltip, I don't want a line and so on. So yeah, that's a nice and a different use case of using this add a reference line feature. I'm going to remove that and uncheck show header. So the other tip that I have for you is that you can actually drag fields using the control key or the command key if you're using a Mac. So let's say I like to actually see the sales values on each bar. So typically what you would do is you'd go back to the measures pane, you'd find sales here, and then you drag that and you put it onto label, which is fine. A different way that you could do that is by going onto row shelf, and then if you hit control and then keep hold of control and then left click on the measure pill and then drag that onto the label card in the marks pane and then let go. You can also, that's another way of actually labeling marks in the view. And that's by hitting control or command if you're on a Mac and left clicking with a mark. Another thing that you can do with holding the control key is by duplicating fields. So in this case, I would like to duplicate the sales field. So I would hit control or command if you're on a Mac, left click on the sum of sales, and then hold that and drag it across. And if I let go, I've actually duplicated the field. This is a bit quicker than trying to find the same measure value, this measure pill, and then dragging it on. And then you could also dual axes and do whatever you like and so on. So yes, next tip is creating a hierarchy. So this data set is looking at Game of Thrones data. So this is just looking at the seasons, and I've got the air date, I've got the episode number, and I've got the episode name and so on, and I've got this emotion field. So that's basically the ratings that people have given for each episode. So I like to break down the seasons. So I like to put in the episode number followed by the season number, and then I like to break down the emotions so that I could see what people have rated it by emotion count. Make that a bar. So, but I would like to make this quicker by just making it drill down. So what I could do is build a hierarchy. So if I remove these fields, make it back to a circle. So what people commonly do on Tableau is that they will select the fields that they like to make a hierarchy. So in my case, season number, emotion, and episode number. And then right click, hierarchy, create a hierarchy, and I'll just put season break. And then I'll have to adjust the rank, episode number, emotion goes above emotion. So that's the hierarchy sort. And if I click and so on, it works. But a different way that you could actually do this is remove this again. If I remove the hierarchy, one way that I would do this is by dragging season number, and I would put that on top of an episode name, and I could rename it as I want, break down, and I could just shuffle it across, and then I can just drag emotion where I want. So that's an alternative way of building a hierarchy, and you can see that that's immediately worked here. Break it down further. But in this case, I put episode name, which is the same as episode number, but just the name of it. So yes, that's how you can, a different way of creating a hierarchy. So the next tip that I'm going to show you is how you can filter to the latest date. So oftentimes in Tableau, when you build a workbook, sometimes you visit the same dashboard on server every week or every month, and you like to see the latest values for the most recent month or the most recent year, the most recent quarter. One way that you could do that is by having a filter and then manually just edit filter, and then just manually showing the most recent month, year, or so on. This wouldn't be the way to do it, but this is an example. So it's to reduce the manual time that you actually go ahead and filter the latest quarter, a month, and so on. What you can do is add in a filter with the order date in this case, and I'm going to put it into the filter pane. And using the previous tip, I'm going to hold the control key, grab the order date field from here, chuck it into the filters pane, and it'll immediately open the dialog for the filter options. I like to filter to the latest month, year. So I'll click on that, and then normally you could probably check December 2019, but the issue with that is it's not very dynamic. So if it goes into February 2020, you'll have to manually uncheck December 2019 and then check February 2020. But there's this little option here that not many people notices, where it's filtered to latest date value when a workbook is open. So if I filter to that, it'll automatically check December 2019. And there you go. And when you upload this onto server, what happens is when the data refreshes and you have new data and new dates that are more recent, then December 2019 in our case will filter out, and January 2020 will come in, or February 2020, and so on. Okay, so that's that tip. The next tip is to edit tooltips from a dashboard. So here I've got a dashboard for you that investigates sample superstore. So I've got sales over time by category, and I've got profit versus sales for each order. So I've done my tooltips for this chart, but I've realized that I forgot to do the tooltips here. So typically what people would do is that they'll go on the worksheet, go straight to the worksheet and just edit their tooltips here. But there's actually a quicker way of doing this where you could actually edit the tooltip in the dashboard. So what you do, you have to select the dashboard, the worksheet in the dashboard. You go at the top, you go on worksheet, And if you go on tooltip, I can edit as so. So I could put sales, sales, and make that bold. I could do the same thing for profit. But yes, so here you go. I've got my tooltips edited right here. This is especially handy when you have 4 or 5 worksheets in one dashboard, and it's a pain to go to a worksheet and then flip back to the dashboard, go to the other worksheet and edit the tooltip there. So this actually helps save a lot of time. Okay, so that's it from me from this side of speed building. So I'm going to pass it back to Louise. Over to you.
All right, thanks, Savannah. So for the last parts of the speed building section, I have a very quick tip on how to swap your rows and columns really quickly. So in this case, I've got quantity and profit on the axes, and I want to switch them over because I think it's going to work better with the profit is on the Y and the quantity is on the X. I could do is drag like this and then switch them over. Or the quicker way of doing it is to click this button at the top here. So it says swap rows and columns. If I hit that, then it will just switch these over, whatever's on rows and whatever's on columns, it'll just switch them over really quickly. So you can see how which orientation looks the best for your chart. The next tip is usually when you're working and building a viz, you'll have loads of fields that you don't actually need. You're only using a few of them to make your viz, and it can take some time to look for the ones that are actually relevant for you. So what you could do is hide all the ones that you're not using. So if you hit this little caret next to dimensions, and you'll see the option for hide all unused fields. So if I do that, you can see the list of fields and dimensions and measures has been reduced because it's hidden the fields I'm not currently using anywhere in my workbook. So then you can just focus on the ones that you're actually using, and it's easier to find those. So what if later on you decide you have hidden some fields that you actually want to use? So how do you unhide them all? Well, if you go back into the caret and then click show hidden fields, it'll show all the hidden fields in gray, but it hasn't actually unhidden them for you yet, so you can't drag it into the view or use it because it's hidden. So what you want to do is you can right click on a gray field and click unhide, and you can see it's unhidden order ID, and then I can use it in my field. But then it's a bit long to do that individually for each of the gray fields. So what I can do is I can click one of the gray fields and then scroll down to the bottom of my list and click shift and select the last one. So now I've selected all the pills in between. Doesn't matter if some of the pills aren't hidden. But if I right click and click unhide, it will unhide everything at once. That's how you can show and hide your fields to make building vizzes a bit quicker for you. Next tip is on coloring your chart. So if I want this chart of quantity for each manufacturer, if I want it colored by quantity, I could drag it from the measures onto color, or I could do what Savannah showed earlier, which is clicking the control key and then dragging quantity from the columns onto color. Or another way of doing it would be to hover over the axis that you want to color the chart by. So I'm hovering over quantity here. And then you see this green triangle in the corner. What I can do is hover over that, drag it. So it's giving me a little icon to let me know that I can drag it. And then just drag it onto the chart, and it will color your axes by quantity. So it's less distance that you need to be dragging by, so it's marginally a bit quicker. Next, I will show you how you can add custom colors. So you can see here that I've colored all the subcategories that are below average or above average in different colors, and these are default Tableau colors. But say in your company you have, for your brand, you have a color scheme that you would like to use in your vizzes. What you might do is manually, each time you want to change a color, go into here and then type in the hex code, or you might change the RGB values to be what your brand colors are and do that manually each time. Or you might end up having to stick to the colors that are default in Tableau. What you can actually do is add your own custom color palettes. So if you see below here, I've got loads of different color palettes that are all custom. A lot of these you can find online. So if I want to change these to the Till Information Lab brand colors, I can. And that's by changing your preference file. So I'll show you where that is. So if you go into your File Explorer and you go into your documents, you'll see a folder called My Tableau Repository. So if I go into that, you'll see a file called Preferences. And then if you open that with Notepad or any kind of note software, you'll see the code with all the custom color palettes that I've added. For you, if you haven't got any custom color palettes in there already, then this will be blank. And then you can just add your own. So you can name it your company name and then add all the codes for your company's brand or just colors that you use frequently. There are loads of blogs online on how to do this step by step if this is a bit too quick to follow. I've also written a blog on how to do this. You can find it on the Data School website. So that's how you can create custom color palettes to quickly access. So that concludes all our tips for the speed building section. Next, we'll talk about how to quickly build calculations. So I'll hand over back to Stefana to start that section off.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, so I'm going to start off with quick calcs in Tableau. First off, I'm going to talk to you about how to rename fields in shelves. So that could be the column or row shelf. So what you have here is sample superstore data, and I'm tallying the number of orders by state. You can see that state is in title case, but I prefer things to be in uppercase. So what people would typically do is make a calculated field, uppercase state, and then make an extra field just to replace that. I don't like doing that. I don't like making extra calcs just for formatting. What I tend to do instead is double click, 2 forward slashes, so basically a comment entry. So I should start that again actually so that I could follow through. So just double click in one of the shelves, do 2 forward slashes to make a comment entry, and I'm going to name this field state in title case just as it is in here. And then I'm going to do shift enter, so make a new line entry, and I'm going to make a formula. So in my case, it will be upper, I made that field already. So upper state, and close that, and I'm going to hit enter. And then you'll see that if I just remove the original pill, that I've got exactly the same thing, but in uppercase. And what you'll notice is that the field actually looks exactly as the normal state field. So if I bring that one back, it's exactly the same. So I know that might have been a bit difficult to see. So what I did here was essentially just put a comment entry, and I wrote it, named the field the same as the original state field. So it'll be state, and I will put put in the formula state, and I'll close it off. So that's essentially what I have done. This doesn't actually produce a new field in the dimensions and measures pane, which is great because I like to have I don't like to have as many calculations as possible. I'd like to reduce and only keep calculations that are absolutely necessary. Things, trivial things such as this, where I just need something to be all uppercase, I feel like I could just do it in here. I should stress, however, that this tip is probably not best practice. So if you ever do use something like this, I would put a caption in the worksheet so people will know. Just the reason because this isn't common practice and it's not common knowledge. So if you pass on this workbook to someone else and they pick it up and they try to look for a field that's called state, that's called something that doesn't actually exist here, they might go a bit mad if they don't know that, if they just double click and see that this is actually just a ghost field that does exactly the same thing. Okay, so that's that tip. Another tip that I have is sometimes you might be looking at an old workbook and you're trying to reverse engineer what you've done, and you've got massive calculations. And in my case, I'll just do a fixed by each region, sum of sales. So I've got that. Let me go on a new worksheet actually. So I've got this, and I'm just going to assume that this is a seriously hefty calc, and I like to unpick it. So what I will do is highlight the field, and then left click on it, hold it, and drag this here, just so I can understand what's happening. So Tableau actually allows you to copy fields and drag it onto shelves, and I can actually do the same thing here. I can highlight sales, sum of sales, and then drag it onto the view, and I'll build my chart. So this is sometimes a bit easier than trying to find the fields in here. So imagine if you have a lot of fields in your data source, and there's this one big hefty one where it's got a lot of just a lot of calculated fields inside. So instead of trying to look for something in here where it can be a needle on the haystack, you could just easily copy and paste here. So yeah, I think you could do the same thing with this, where if I highlight sales, this is I just highlight sales, and then if I right click and then drag it on to the view, as what Louise showed earlier, I could also change it to average and so on. So that's just a different way of doing things. So that's it from me for quick calcs. I'll pass it on to Louise.
Thanks, Savannah. So I have got 2 calc tips. So the first one is you can actually add your create calculated fields from the fields that you have edited in the view. So for example, if you created a table calc, like in this instance, you can see that it's actually a calculation in here. Or sometimes you can go into the shelf or the marks card and type in a formula of some sort, like sum of sales over sum of profit, for example. And you can add these calculations into your data pane by just dragging it in. And you can see it's dropped it here, and you can rename it whatever you want. So profit ratio. And you can see it's also renamed the pill that's on the rows shelf right now. So I can do the same for table calcs as well as these types of calculations. So then it's in the data pane and you can use it elsewhere without having to type out the calculation again in the pill on the shelf. And then another one that's really useful is, say you have built out a workbook for your marketing team, and it's got all these great calculations that you want to reuse in a different workbook for another team. Instead of having to rewrite out all the calculations, what you can do is you can copy the sheet and then paste it in a new workbook. But to do that, you have to have something in the view. So I'm just going to drop discount in the view. And then what I can do is right click and then click copy on a sheet. Any sheet will do. And it's saying that it's been copied. Click OK. And if I go into a new workbook and I paste it down here on the tabs, you can see it's added that chart as well as all the calculations that came with that data source. So you can see I've got all these calculations I've written earlier. It's retained that, so then I can use all these calculations again. And if I go back to this, so that's all our calculation tips. Our next tips will be on formatting, so how you can do that quicker, easier. So I'll hand over back to Savannah to go over those formatting tips.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. So yes, I'll resume our tips with starting off with formatting. So sometimes in Tableau, whenever I build a chart, so let's do sales by profit, and then I've got grid lines, and I normally do not like grid lines just because I personally feel like it doesn't add extra value since we have tooltips. So one thing that I would do is just right click, format, go on the lines, and then undo it. Nice, it's clean, it's exactly the way I want it. However, imagine building numerous charts where you have a lot of grid lines and you have to manually unformat each chart. it's a bit of a pain. So the way that we can resolve this is by, you go look above, if you click on format, and you can format your workbook. So click that. So I can actually choose the way that I want things to be presented. In my case, I want everything to be Tableau book, but I want it to be this shade of black. I want my worksheets to all be size 10. So now they'll all be size 10 font. My worksheet titles will have to be Tableau book 15, and I want it to be this shade of black. And also that's all the fonts section. And below you've got lines. So here's the grid line, and you can actually turn it off so that whenever I build a chart on Tableau, the grid lines won't pop up. I can also just format my 0 lines and so on. You could do as what you can go as much as format as much as you like, and this will carry forward across all the sheets that you build in Tableau. So now if we look back and build another chart again, if I do profit versus sales, you can see that the grid lines have disappeared because I've told Tableau that that's my default formatting for this. So that's the case on how to visually format stuff, but you can actually default format your fields. So for example, if I put profit, you'll see that if I put this onto label, so I'm going to hit control, drag sum of profit onto label, I can see that if I do entire view, I can see that it's just got 286,397, but I actually want the units to be there, and I want it to be displayed in thousands. So what you typically do is that you click on format in the labels, and then I would do my formatting changes here, which is great. But then if I have to do the same thing again and again and again for various other sheets by using the same field, it's a bit of a nuisance, it's a bit of a faff, especially since I've done it numerous times before in the same workbook. So you can remedy this by going on to the profit field, right click, and if you go on default properties, and you can go on number format, and then I can actually tell Tableau that I want it to be currency format, I want 1 decimal place, and I want it to be in 1,000 units, and the prefix will be in dollars. Yes, I do want 1,000 separators, but in this case that won't work because my display would be in thousands, so it doesn't matter if I leave that checked or unchecked. So if I hit OK, you'll notice that that changes, and it will change accordingly whenever I bring the sum of profit field back into that view. So this isn't limited to only numeric fields. You can do the same thing with dates. So if I go on order date, right click, and then go on default properties. In this case, instead of saying number format, we have date format. So I can click on that, and I can say that I want custom view, and I just want to look like this. So day, shorthand for month, and full hand for year. So if I bring that up, then if I change it to exact date, it should bring out the units as so. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. You can also do it with color as well. So if I want to color each dates to have their own, each segment to have their own color, you can go on this, default properties, color, and I can assign colors for specific fields in that, specific entries in that field. So I've already done that in advance. So I could assign it different colors. So I could put consumer this neon pink. And then now if I split this up by color, it'll carry forward across. Okay, undo that. Next up is that I can actually format directly in Tableau dashboards as well. So imagine you have a dashboard and you have various number of sheets. Oh, you can see that after I've actually changed the workbook formats, that the subtitles in here have all gone black because I've dictated in here that I'd like all of my font to be in Tableau book and to be that shade of black. But don't worry, you can actually change this on certain exceptions. I can change it back to this if I want. But yes, as I was saying, you can actually directly format sheets on a dashboard. sometimes you'll have numerous sheets on the dashboard and it might be a bit of a faff to go to each workbook and then format the axes or the grid lines and so on, and then flip back to the dashboard and then go to a different worksheet. So I'll show you here. So if I select this profit versus sales sheet, if I right click, hit format, I can go and format as I like. Let's say I want grid lines back. I can bring grid lines back and it's this awful red if I want to, and so on. So this saves a bit of time if you've got a lot of sheets in one place that you need to format in one and save time. So that's it for me on fast formatting. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Savannah. So I have a tip on how to retain your formatting within each sheet that you do. So for example, in this case, I've got a really nice big number for sales in December 2019. And say I want the same thing, but for profit as well, and then for quantity, etc. What I could do is build out a new sheet and then format everything just like this, like change all the fonts again to the correct sizing, remove all the row and column dividers. I can do that all again manually. Or I could take the quicker route and right click on the sheet that I want to copy the formatting of and click duplicate. And that'll create an exact copy of the sheet that you just saw. And then I can just change the details that I want and it will retain all the other formatting that I had in the previous sheet. So you can see that I've changed it to profit. So this number has gone down to show you the sum of profit for December 2019. And then I can just change it from sales to profit. So now I have two charts, one for sales and one for profit. Looks exactly the same. It's much quicker than actually typing out or creating a new sheet all over again. You can do the same thing for dashboards. So I have this dashboard for sales, but say I want to make the same dashboard for profit, but with just different charts. I want it to have the same container structure. I want the logo and the information button to be in the same location in the sheet. I want in the dashboard. I want the dashboard to be the same size. So I basically want it to be exactly the same, but just change the chart content. So what I can do is, like before, I can right-click on the tab and then click duplicate. And then I'll create an exact copy of the dashboard that we just saw. And I can remove what I don't want, or I can just keep that because I didn't fix it. If I just drag in anything, chart here, and then I remove the other chart. Now I have the title and the information button and the logo in the exact same positions. The dashboard is the same size. Everything's the same, except I can now change the charts to be what I want. And then the final formatting tip we have for you is how to copy formatting from one sheet to another. So very similar to the previous tips, say in this beautiful line chart, you can see it's got like loads of column dividers, grid lines, and some stuff that I don't really want. So I want it to look more like this dashboard here. So I want it to look more like this line chart. What I can do is go into the chart and right click on the tab, copy formatting, and then go back into my line chart, right click on that, and then paste format. So you can see it's added the row banding, it's removed the grid lines. It looks more like the other chart. So this saves you time from having to go through and format the shading, the borders, and the lines all over again. So those are mine and Savannah's tips on formatting. We'll be going into our final section, which is how you can actually make your vizzes faster.
Thank you very much, Louise. So I will be going through the first few tips in building for performance. So one of the most underutilized tools, in my opinion, in Tableau, and I'm also guilty of this, is that there is the performance tracker. So what that means is if it tracks performance on how fast or slow the data is being queried on Tableau. So I click on something, it'll tell me how fast it is. The way that you can actually capture this data and view it is by going on help and then go on settings and performance and then go down to start performance recording. So I'll click start and it will immediately start and I can filter my data so, and I can do whatever I want, however I want to use the dashboard. If I want to stop, go back to help, settings and performance, stops performance recording. So it will take a minute or so and Tableau will generate a report and it will spit out a dashboard. So a moment now, yep. So you don't need to look for this dashboard or this workbook. It will just pop up immediately on your PC or laptop, wherever you're using this. And you can see that Tableau gives me a report on how on what's happening, how fast, how slow, events sorted by time, so computing layout took the longest and so on, and they group the events. This is really great and handy if you've got a massive dashboard that has a lot of worksheets and you know it's taking a really long time and you'd actually like to see what's the problem and why this is happening. This is a really nice way to investigate what's going on, and it's really quick as well to actually get that report back right back at you. So that's a way of sort of tracking your performance. So let's go to the next tip in building for performance is extract filter. So I am using the world indicators data source. This is a data source that's also given by Tableau. Sometimes when you connect to data, you'll have a lot of records, a lot of fields. And if you connect to the data live, as so, it can hinder performance because you're constantly querying the data. If you drag a pill onto a shelf or make a dashboard action and so on. So what I'd like to do is make an extract of the data. That's simply done by extracting the data. And sometimes I know that I won't be using all of the fields necessary. So in my case, for the world indicators, I would only like to look at in Europe, and I'm only interested in the most recent 5 years. So if I extract the data, hit edit, I can filter the data that I only want as well. So I've already filtered for Europe. So if I want to filter for the most recent years, I'll go into add and I will look for year, double click, and I'm only interested in the past 5 years. So I'll highlight the 5 years and I'll check, and I can see that selected 5 of 13 values. Also notice how you can actually still filter the latest value here, following from the last tip that I shared with you. I'm not going to check that. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'll hit OK here, and then it will build that extract for me. And then I think it should have done that. Fingers crossed. Yes. So you can see that only the most recent 5 years in this data set will be brought in. The years 2000 onwards have disappeared because that's the only thing that I've got rid of that. So this is pretty good because if you want to save time and you know exactly what you definitely need, it's definitely worthwhile making sure that you extract the data and you actually filter for what you need, and so on. Okay, so next step on my side is building a performing dashboard. So when you have a dashboard, so this is looking at Sample Superstore, and on the left, I've got profit by state, and I've got number of orders on the right by ship mode. I've also given the user the ability to filter by region and filter for a specific customer and color legends and so on. Sometimes people like to show as much information as possible in their dashboard. But the thing is that actually slows the dashboard performance down by a lot. So one thing that I suggest is actually building a breakdown view. So for example, some people might want to see all of this in one go straight away, but actually you might not need to see a breakdown of the individual customers that make up the order using the Sample Superstore data. What I have done is actually given a dashboard action that allows you to drill down specifically to what you want. So if I'm only interested in drilling down to the customers in first class, for this specific month, June 2018, I'll click on the mark and it'll break down to that specific customer, and it'll only show me data relevant to that rather than showing me data from 2016 and 2019 and so on. This helps with making the dashboard work a bit faster because you're not showing absolutely everything. So with the way that I build that is using a dashboard action. So the shorthand key that I'm going to use is Control-Shift-D to open the dashboard action window. In Mac users, I think it's Command-Shift-D as well. So here I've just got the filter action. So I've checked the worksheets that I like the action to come from. So that's number of orders by ship mode and only show relevant values. And I like the target sheet to be breakdown. And when I click away, clear the section, I like to exclude all the values. So that helps make things disappear, as you can see here. So I don't need to deal with that unless I ask for it. Another thing is that with filters, some people like forget that there's actually an option here where you can only show relevant values. So this is pretty cool because what happens is, so say for example, I would like to filter to East alone. There are some customers in here that are being shown but don't exist in the East region. So it might make it a bit harder to actually look for the customer that you want. So what I would do is I suggest that you select only relevant values, and whenever you filter, so in my case East, I'm going to switch to South, the customer names will change to only those that exist in South. Another thing that I recommend, especially when it comes to using filters on dashboards, is to actually customize and show apply button. So what happens is, I just undo that for the time being. What happens is sometimes you want to filter to a specific customer. So I want to get uncheck all, and you'll notice that everything disappears. And then if I select a couple, you'll notice that the dashboard actually takes a while to render that all in, and you don't want the dashboard to disappear as a whole because sometimes the end user experience might not be great because some people will be like, what happened? Where did my data go? So to remedy that, I'm going to clear the section by clicking on this little icon here. I'm going to do customize again and show apply button so that when people deselect or select their fields, you'll see that there is a cancel and apply button. So if I uncheck all, you'll notice that nothing actually happens in this dashboard. And let's say I want to select these customers, I'll check them and then I'll hit apply, and then the query would be executed. So that's just a quick way of making sure the end user experience is more smooth and actually makes your dashboard more better performance. Okay, so that's it from my side of the building for performance. I'm going to pass it over to Louise.
Okay, so for the last set of tips, I'm going to explain why quick filters aren't actually quick. So what are quick filters? It is these filters that you see on the side here that users can interact with to quickly change what data is included within the view. So these would be like the single value dropdowns or lists, or any of those would be quick filters. So the reason why these aren't quick is that in the background, Tableau is actually calculating all the possible combinations of all your filters that you've got in here. So as you can see with this many filters, it is a lot of possible combinations. So Tableau doing all that heavy lifting unnecessarily, really. So the recommendation would be to avoid having this many quick filters, try to limit it to maybe 5 or under, so that Tableau doesn't have to compute all the possible combinations beforehand and then render the dashboard. It could end up being really slow, especially if you've got a data set that's quite big. So instead of doing these quick filters, if you still want to allow the user to investigate the data, you can do what Stefana showed earlier. So using dashboard actions, that would be more performant than having this many quick filters. Next is comparing Boolean numbers and strings as data types. So which ones are faster than which? So you can see in this chart, same chart from earlier, where I'm showing all the subcategories that are below average and above average in different colors. So I will show you what it looks like as a Boolean calculation, one with numbers and one with strings, and explain which ones are faster. So if I just unhide these because they were hidden from our earlier tip. So if I put string on, so this is what the calculation looks like if it was a string. So I'm saying if the discount is lower than the average, then it's less than average, otherwise it's more than average. And I've written that out as text, so it will appear as a string. And you can see here in the legend that it says less than average and more than average. So strings are actually the slowest data type. So strings and dates are both slowest out of these three compared to numbers and Booleans. So if I want to speed this up, I would write the calculation as a number or a Boolean. So I'll show you what a number one looks like. So it looks like the exact same thing. It's an if statement where I'm saying that if the average discount is less than the average of the window, then return 1. So this time it's a number. Instead of saying less than average, more than average, I'm saying 1 or 0. So if I put that onto color, you'll see once again that it's 0 and 1 instead of less than or more than average. So this is quicker than using a string because Tableau can compute numbers more quickly. But the quickest way to do it, in both terms of quickness of typing out the calculation as well as for Tableau to compute it, would be to use a Boolean. So Booleans are quick because they're only a true or false. So it's only two options. It's much quicker than if you were to put in a string or a number. So to write that calculation, you don't need the if statement at all. You can just say average discount is less than the window average of discount. So that would return either a true or false because the numbers either agree with or disagree with this statement. So if I drag that onto the colors, you can see it's a true or false. This would be the most performant way of writing this statement. So it goes Boolean fastest, then numbers, then strings and dates. Next, how do you write performant if statements? So here you can see all the sports in the Olympics in this data set. And if I want to group together all the statements that are, all the sports that are water sports, there are a number of ways I can do it. I could write it as a nested if, which is really terrible, where I'm saying that if the sport is canoeing, then it's a water sport, and then nesting an if statement within the else to specify all the other sports that are water sports. So this would work, but it would be very slow compared to other ways that you could do it. So using an else if statement instead of a nested if is much quicker because Tableau doesn't need to calculate the innermost nest and then work its way outwards. So this would be quicker, and it would also work the same way if I just drag that in to show you what it looks like. So split into other sports and water sports. The next even quicker way than using an if statement is to use a case statement, because as you saw in the if statement earlier, it's referring to the field sport multiple times. In the case statement, it's only looking at the field sport once. So that will save Tableau some computing power. So here I'm saying that look into sport, and then when canoeing is water, when it's canoeing, then it's water sport, etc., etc. So this will be quicker than using the if statement or the nested if. And then to make it even quicker, what I can do is sort my case statement. So as you can see all the water sports. I've put the number of records in, and you can see that rowing has the most number of records. So if I put rowing first, then what Tableau will do is look for rowing, and then all the remaining fields will go into the next statement, and then it'll look for swimming. So by getting rid of the condition that has the most rows first, I'm allowing Tableau to look at fewer rows next. So that will save time. Hopefully I explained that clearly enough. So that would be the most fast way of doing this. But really, this kind of calculation should be done in the database before it gets into Tableau, either in Alteryx or whatever software you're using to process your data. Because these statements are row level, they don't contain any aggregates or anything like that. You should really do them in the database beforehand. Tableau is great for aggregating calculations, but anything that's row level, do it beforehand and save Tableau's power for what it's actually good at, which is aggregations. All right, so that is the last tip that we have for you. If I hand back over to Sophie to close this out.
So thank you, Louise, and thank you, Stefana. I hope everyone found their tips really helpful. Just go ahead and share my screen there. So I hope everyone found their tips really helpful. We're running up on time, so we will skip the quiz. But if you would like to think in your head and have a guess how many tips Stefana and Louise went through, do you think it's below 30 or do you think it is above 30? So if you have enough time and want to jump into the chat box or and let us know if you think it's below or above 30. I'll let you guys know how many the official tip count that we went through was. So I hope while anyone types it in, I hope everyone is staying healthy during this time of quarantine, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the series so far. Tomorrow we have a trio of people to show you tips for Tableau prep. It should be a really fun time. I know cleaning and preparing data and fun aren't normally two words you put together, but trust me, it will help you immensely, and hopefully you'll all pick some things up from our Tableau prep tips tomorrow as well. So that'll be tomorrow at 1 p.m. again. So the official, the official count, great. We've got, yes, definitely above 30. We've got some people coming through. Louise and Stefana, people are saying you've got over 20 tips each. So our official count was just under 20. So I think that's fantastic. People are actually taking away more tips from the session than we officially counted, which is exactly what you want. So yes, everyone who has typed into the chat box, the official count from me was 35, but definitely more. Personally, Stefana, I would count your very attractive line charts as a tip in themselves and how to build a attractive graph that would work in any corporate situation. So thank you guys for joining, and thank you, Stefana and Louise, again for taking us through all of that. This video will be live and I will attach links to the workbooks in the next hour or two. So please do drop back by the Information Lab's YouTube channel to catch any tips you might have missed today, but also catch the videos and links to the workbooks for our tips from the last 2 days. So that's formatting tips from Monday and Zen level tips by Lorna yesterday. So thank you guys all very much. I'm going to end the stream now and I hope everybody has a lovely afternoon. So from me, Louise and Stefana, all based in London, I hope you have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.